I work for the Office of Naval Research Global, which is part of the Office of Naval Research, which does basic scientific research for the United States Navy. I was recently in Jamaica. I went to Kingston and the Mona campus, also to the Discovery Bay Marine Lab, and there I met quite a number of great scientists. And this is an opportunity for some other folks who were not actually able to make it to that meeting, perhaps some who were, to talk about their research. So it's time for Let the Research Speak. We have some representatives from the Naval Research Lab. We have some representatives from the Faculty of Science and Technology at the Mona campus. And the idea is for them to share their ideas, to get to know each other a bit, and to do it all in full view of the YouTube watching public. And of course, after this is recorded, it can be shared with your colleagues to learn more about what the Naval Research Lab is doing in the United States. And then for our hosts, of course, at the Mona campus of UE. So it's great. I think we should get the agenda started. We have a full agenda with, let's see here, 7 scientists from both sides of the border here. So let's get started with Professor Dale Weber coming on first. Professor Weber is a coastal ecologist. He does research in the marine sciences, and he was appointed as the director of the Center for Marine Sciences and the Discovery Bay Marine Laboratory in August 2023. He also has served as the Pro Vice Chancellor and the Principal of the Mona campus at UE between 2018 and 2023. He was the Pro Vice Chancellor for Graduate Studies and Research before that, from 2015 to 2018. He has a distinguished career in coastal ecology and environmental management, and a strong and consistent record of teaching, graduate supervision, administration, and research, which spans those 35 years of service with the UE. I'd like to give Professor Weber his time right now to go ahead and talk about his research. Thank you for being here, Professor.
Thank you very much, Kyle, and good afternoon to you all, colleagues. Good morning. I'm not sure where in the world you may be, because this is going to be all over the world. Thank you for the opportunity. So, as Kyle said, I am Dale Weber. I'm from the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and my current portfolio is Director of the Center for Marine Sciences, which is a Department of Life Sciences. I want to share a couple of research projects and partnerships that are happening to open doors, as well as to share what we're doing. And I think it'll give us some opportunities for future projects, as well as understanding how some of what we do. So who are we? We're the Center for Marine Sciences, and in the true University of the West Indies tradition, our mandate is teaching, research, and outreach. Within our teaching, we have undergraduate programs, as well as graduate programs, as well as assisting many of our schools with what we call our school-based assessments, where they come to our marine laboratories to do some of their school assessments, which are not available within our school system. That is a part of our outreach as well. Our research is our strength, and if you think about a university, the idea is that today's research can be in tomorrow's lecture, as opposed to a non-research university where they have to wait a while to find the research. Our research is in marine and coastal environments, or in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, wherever the opportunity offers, and I'll mention 1 or 2 of those. Our outreach is to provide advice to the governments of Jamaica and region, non-governmental organizations, and private sector, should they so desire. And we do some of this through specialized entities, such as our Biodiversity Center, which is at the Port Royal Marine Lab, and schools. Our focus areas: ecosystem studies, generally looking at mangrove, seagrass, coral reef ecosystems, coastal forests, estuaries. So wherever there is water touching land, we're interested. Coastal zone management, in terms of managing what's there, how it is used. We often use a little term that says environmental management is not management of the environment, it's actually people management, since left alone, the environment could manage itself. We do a lot of pollution monitoring and mitigation, and general studies in terms of marine sciences and marine ecosystems. So for us, marine research is really what we do. I'm going to run through a couple of projects that I think might be of interest. One project we started, we're about to close, is on carbon sequestration and using the information from our mangrove and seagrass in terms of what they can sequester in terms of carbon. We worked with the Nature Conservancy in Pew to determine what is Jamaica's carbon stock. That's important because we will now be able to say the amount of carbon stored in our trees, yes, especially in our coastal systems, and mangroves seem to store a lot more than the traditional terrestrial trees. Our seagrasses don't seem to store as much per acreage, but because of how much of it we have, it turns out to be more than our mangroves. So we're learning new concepts about how we store carbon. And we're going to be using this, as I said, to advise the government. Currently, we're using this as a part of our National Determined Contributions, our NDCs, in the climate change arena to help the discussion. The partnership with Pew has brought us expertise from across the Caribbean. And of course, with TNC, who've had a footprint across the world, we've been able to nail this down and just recently closed our contributions towards this NDC discussion. And we hope to be able to do more of this in the future and willing to share what we've learned so others can benefit it. Kingston Harbour is another of our projects. Now, we've been working Kingston Harbour from the University of Swansea. In fact, our Port Royal Marine Lab sits right at the very tip of Kingston Harbour. It's the 7th deepest natural harbour in the world. If you ever hear anybody tell you it's the 7th largest, no. A harbour is not great by its size, it's great by its depth. But that's the draft that you want to bring in vessels. But that aside, we've been working with a group called the Ocean Cleanup just about to start this project, where they have put interceptors. Kingston is drained by 19 gullies and 2 rivers, all of which carry solid waste into the harbor. They recently put out some retainers or some barriers to stop that from happening. Wouldn't it be nice to know that the coastal systems are improving, having put these barriers in place? So this is us on our reconnaissance, doing our first plastic pollution check. Now that the barriers are in, we have worked with the Ocean Cleanup to now work on the mangrove systems to determine, are they growing, are they benefiting? Since we put in the barriers, have we seen an improvement? This has just started, and we are going to be doing this for the next 3 years. And it is a project that we think will give us opportunities. A big part of the problem that we have with plastics is, of course, microplastics. We have recently started a project with the International Atomic Energy Agency to look at microplastics. It has 3 components. It's actually looking at water quality with the National Water Commission, looking at using nuclear technology in the Scientific Research Council with plants, and we're looking at the section in terms of the marine environment. Here we're looking at microplastics and pollution and how we can determine what's there, both in water and in sediments, so that we can start to trace back to in terms of the breakdown products, how long it takes, and hopefully be able to use it as a part of our advice mechanism when we get into discussions about our marine environment. An interesting project that we've got. We are limited by the vessels that we have, and I'm going to speak about our 2 marine labs in 3 minutes, I think I have, Kyle. Well, here's an opportunity to go beyond where our boats can go. The MV Dawn is a vessel which sails around the Caribbean, used to go around the Pacific as well, and it's really based on it's humanitarian organization. Hurricane, earthquakes, there are opportunities for them to go and work around islands over there, natural disasters. They thought, in between this sailing, in between disasters, wouldn't it be nice to do some science? So they approached us and we worked out a nice little protocol. And they're actually doing some retrofits to this vessel now to allow scientists from the university to come on board in between the disasters and do research in clear ocean waters that we are not very often able to access based on our limitations. This for me opens a door, and I don't know if, as we talk through our discussions, I know Kyle had an interest when he came to Discovery Bay, could we do work beyond our shelves? Here's one way that we can get it done. We call this a ship of opportunity, and we think it's a great opportunity. University of West Indies has 2 marine laboratories, one in the middle of the North Coast in Discovery Bay, and one, as I said, at the very tip of Kingston Harbour, which is on the South Coast. The Discovery Bay Marine Lab has recently, through a series of projects from the Department of the Interior, from the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Efficiencies, and the German GIZ, have been able to completely take this lab off the national grid by completing a solar project. This project, it took about 4 different iterations to get it done, but we're now completely there with a full battery system, which is there. Why have I presented this? Although it is a benefit to the lab, it is also a great research opportunity. We've been able to help our colleagues back in the physics and electronics departments on the main campus to look at how we could do alternative energy and renewable energy. And using the lab as a proof of concept, we're hoping that this will be able to spill over to many other places. So we're getting the climate adaptation, but we're also getting the teaching and learning. An interesting project at Discovery Bay Marine Lab is looking at queen conch. Jamaica actually has the largest conch store in the entire Caribbean. That is, more conch is grown in Jamaican waters, but it's all offshore and it's being overfished. This project with Harbour Branch and with specialists from Harbour Branch, funding from the U.S. Embassy, we have been able to grow conch, well, take them from hatchlings, from eggs, grow them through to maturity. When they've got a large enough size, then we get them back into the environment. So we've been able to increase the success rate of survival of conch and therefore contribute to, one, the biodiversity, and two, being able to replenish the conch that's there. And a lot of this funding has come from an individual who had an interest in seeing conch grow, and that for us, we'd like to get more entrepreneurs and more philanthropists interested, as happened here. We're also working on a North Coast mangrove restoration project where mangroves have become a special interest in Jamaica, and we found that while we can replant, and we do have replanting mechanisms, we have a lot of seedlings that we replant. Why replant if you can protect? You never can replace as well as nature has done it. So we're doing conservations wherever possible, and it's contributed again to the governmental decision of a no net loss policy. Whenever there's mangrove to be lost by reason of development, we are asked to put it back in. Switching to the Port Royal lab on the South Coast, well, we've done a similar project to put in renewable energy on the South Coast at our smaller marine lab, but a much older lab, which is based on Kingston Harbour. This has reduced our energy cost, not quite off the grid yet, but will be very shortly, funded by the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica. But it does mean we can do things with high energy. For instance, we can run our biodiversity center and run all our tanks and aquaria through a system without the large cost of electricity, which means we can put more money into conservation and into education. The final project I'm going to share is something from our Port Royal Marine Lab, and it's on restoration, not of mangroves now, but of coral reefs, where we've been growing Acropora cervicornis on the barrier reef, which is just outside Port Royal, being able to plant these corals back in areas that they have been impacted, whether by hurricanes or storms or sediment outflow. We've been able to, using a special artificial iron reef structure called an air module, being able to plant out and have them grow and actually replenish what's happening out on our coral reef systems. That has resulted in not just coral growth, but now you're recreating the three-dimensional process. So you're creating, think of a hotel, a fish hotel, if you would like it's a three-dimensional structure to give rugosity back to what was a reef system that had been decimated. As long as the problem is no longer there, and if the problem, for instance, was wastewater or nutrient outfall, which created eutrophication, you need to turn that off first. No sense putting coral out there to go through the same problem. But as long as it's a problem which was caused by either disease or by a hurricane or some ship grounding, we found that we've now, through our research, been able to make an applicable, practical contribution to replenishing yet another ecosystem, which we think is of great value. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share. I look forward to being able to hear from all our colleagues, making the connections. And as the research speaks, we think it should speak for itself. Thank you very much. I'm Dale Weber.
Thank you, Professor Weber. That was fantastic. I was happy to learn that you have the 7th deepest harbor in the world there. I didn't realize that was true. I was also really glad to see your colleagues in the photograph from Discovery Bay, who I met just last month. I was very impressed with the conch project, and then the artificial reef. It's also something I've seen Navy construction experts investigating as part of research. So that one was very exciting. But perhaps this GSD ship of opportunity is the one that really stands out. I mean, that's an infrastructure opportunity that you have on deck to give perhaps an opportunity for Navy research scientists to come down and collaborate, or at least to talk to you about the data that you're able to gather and hopefully keep for publication. Fantastic, Professor Weber. I appreciate it. And thanks for sticking around to listen to the rest of the group. So next we have one of my colleagues from the Naval Research Lab, Dr. Jeffrey Reed. He's actually at the Monterey, California campus, which is the lesser known side of the Naval Research Lab, but a place where they do a great deal atmospheric and oceanographic research. And so Jeff, Dr. Reed, has a PhD in atmospheric science. He is an applied meteorologist and an aerosol phenomenologist. He has a research portfolio from basic research to more applied science, all the way through prototype development for operations that would be relevant to the U.S. Navy, but also our partner navies in the region, including in Jamaica, but also I'm sure some dual use opportunities as well. So his basic research focuses on linking in situ with remote sensing observations for aerosol and cloud processes to understand the environmental state. So I'm really excited to hear what Jeff has to say. I believe he's done some work in the region that he can talk about. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kyle. Let me get my slides up.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I just need to get here. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction. So Kyle asked me to talk about one of your sister islands, 2,000 kilometers to the east. But everything that we're talking about here can be applied also to islands such as Jamaica. So I'm talking for a very large science team of about 50 people. But within the Caribbean itself, Andrea Seeley at CIMH is our Caribbean coordinator. So if there's anything here that's of interest to you, let me know or let Andrea know, and we can get you rolling. So bottom line up front, I manage the moisture and aerosol gradients physics of inversion evolution, or MAGPIE program. And basically the problem that we have is that we always kind of treat the atmosphere in layers. There's a boundary layer, there's a troposphere, there's a stratosphere, and that kind of layering, that sort of layering picture we forces you to actually reduce or lose a lot of information. So what we did is we started looking at the air-sea interface, the marine boundary layer, the lower free troposphere, to kind of delaminate the marine environment. And so there was basically been 4 field missions that we've done so far, and 3 of the 4 have been focused in Barbados. And the nice thing about Barbados is it's ideal for marine boundary layer work. It's there's nothing but 4,000 kilometers of ocean between Barbados and Africa, and there's a lot of transitions that happens right there. And so we started actually doing field work in 2023, where we brought out a small aircraft, the Naval Postgraduate School Surpass Twin Otter, and then also added a bunch of wind and aerosol lidars to the region. And then we came back a year later in 2024. We didn't have the Twin Otter this time, but we had more NOAA P3 time to kind of look at the regional environment. And then last year we did actually something in Monterey Bay, because there was one thing we couldn't really get in the Caribbean, and that's the stable boundary layer. And then we just finished up this last February at Ragged Point on Barbados with our last mission, and that was winter season. And the reason why we wanted that is that, yeah, we wanted to look at the winter marine boundary layer, but also there's a high proclivity of dust and smoke that gets transported over from Africa into the region. So I just want to focus on these 2 figures here on the lower right. So this is synthetic aperture radar. This is an estimate of surface winds for one particular time during the August 2023 campaign. And this is what you would consider fair weather sorts of conditions. And the nice thing about synthetic aperture radar is we can actually get wind speed retrievals to 250 meters. And what you see is that in fair weather easterly trades, there's a lot of variability. You see sorts of roll structures here. You see these sorts of lines of high wind speeds. That's real. Those are atmospheric roll structures that relate air-sea interaction all the way up to the cloud. You see these enormous wakes that come off of the island, and that's a really active area of research for us. It's like, why is it that you can have a noticeable wind wake off of an island that can span 500 kilometers easily? And then also, again, there's these little areas of quiescence and little coastal jets. All of these things are happening. So again, you take a look at at the wind from your model and you say, oh, there's going to be 10-knot winds today in the Caribbean or 15-knot winds today. Well, depending on where you are around the island or even out in the open ocean, mileage will vary quite a bit. And this kind of variability is almost impossible for us to deal with in models. Global scale models or mesoscale models can't get down to the resolutions to do this, and large eddy simulation models can't scale up to get it. So it's really in what we call the gray zone, this kind of really interesting area where you really need high resolution over a very, very large area to actually sort out what's going on. If we take a look at the other image, this is aerosol backscatter. This was from a high spectral resolution LiDAR that the University of Wisconsin deployed. And so anytime you see a brighter color here, that basically means more aerosol particles in the atmosphere. And so down in the marine boundary layer here, the lowest 500 meters, right, we're actually seeing the individual updrafts and downdrafts. Those roll structures I was showing you on the synthetic aperture radar image, that is related to these areas of aerosol enhancement and reduction, added in between clouds. And then something that you see a lot of in the Caribbean in the summertime is dust coming over from Africa. And people talk about, oh, how the Saharan air layer brings all of this dust over. And that's kind of true. But what people don't think about is that these dust layers that come over from Africa are geometrically really thin, like only 100 meters in thickness, a couple hundred meters in thickness as they're working their way through. So you think about this large air mass coming over from Africa, but there's all of this microphysics and transport phenomenology that's going on. And then looking at a picture like this, you would assume that, well, yeah, all the dust is at 4 kilometers or 3 kilometers, but in reality, actually, the majority of the dust is in the marine boundary layer, and so right where the people live. So again, there's this conceptual model that, oh, dust is in the south, but that's true. But where we care about it is all this dust that's in the marine boundary layer, not only because of air quality reasons, but that's also where you get iron fertilization into the ocean. So why did we go to Barbados? Again, it's subtropical, so the weather's not too strong or weak unless you have to run from a hurricane. And again, the nice thing about Barbados too, is it has low topography. It's got a long upstream fetch, and there's a lot of variability in aerosol species. Yeah, you see sea salt, but we see dust and smoke, and even pollution coming over all the way from Nigeria. And then the nice thing about operations too, and there's a lesson I think in here for Jamaica as well, is that the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology has a bunch of really talented scientists, and we could not do what we do if we didn't partner with somebody locally there. And we're really impressed about again what their knowledge base is and how hard they're willing to work to make a mission go through. The other nice things about it is that there's been a lot of field work on the eastern side of the island. Ragged Point has been there for like 50 years. And for the last 15 years, the Germans have been out there at Diebel's Point. And so just examples of observations that we routinely do in the field. So, we use the Surpass Twin Otter. That's a Twin Otter research aircraft out of the Naval Postgraduate School, just a couple miles away from me. Do a lot of remote sensing. We use the Ragged Point Tower that's maintained by the University of Miami. We've had sail drones. It's had lots of measurements and collaborations, buoys, all of those sorts of things. We really get into trying to focus on microscale structures around island meteorology and how it interacts with the ocean. And then the other nice thing is, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but there's a lot of variability out there. As I mentioned, that you think about, oh, it's the trades, nothing's really going to change. But over the course of a month, again, we got 5 dust events that came through, huge variability in air quality. Particle concentrations co-vary with wind gusts, cold pools, and all of this stuff, again, varies into ocean parameters like significant wave height and sea surface temperature. So it is a really nice coupled system to understand the ocean atmosphere environment. So I think implications for the region, and again, this is something that I think is a lesson learned if we continue to work with Jamaica, is that the most important thing is that we have a local partner. And there's the Caribbean as a whole is really interesting scientifically, but again, a strong research infrastructure makes our life a lot easier. So Kyle brought up the Dawn. Those are the kinds of opportunities that we look for. And then we're also swimming in data. I think whether or not, you're just talking about our mission or any mission, there is more data than we know how to handle. So if you have somebody who's interested in working on some of these same sorts of problems, give us a call. We're happy to collaborate. There's also lots of opportunities for micro experiments. So as Kyle said that, if we can get on the ship, missions don't have to be huge and expensive. There's a lot of things that can be done that are small, targeted, can get right to the point. And so again, I'm happy to discuss a bunch of topics like that with folks in Jamaica. And then the challenge that you're going to face is the challenge that we face here at NRL, right? Is like data management and workforce organization. We are all spread so thin, but there's lots of problems to work on. And if you can find the time, there's a lot of headway that you can make. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much. It seems like there is some time for questions. Why don't we do that real quick?
Yeah, this actually, bring it up, like this picture here on the right. I was on island when Beryl came rolling through last year. And actually, I was on island when then Tropical Storm Franklin, I think, came through and also hit Jamaica. So as I said, Barbados really is 2,000 kilometers upwind of whatever it is that Jamaica's going to see.
That's right. Well, perhaps any in-depth questions will be offline, let's say. Okay. But I just wanted to comment, you pointed out, carve out some time and give us a call. So there's certainly opportunities to talk to you and your research group about collaborating on some data projects. But I did want to point out what Office of Naval Research Global does. And the reason I suppose I was in Jamaica was to look for opportunities to make research grants. And so if you, Jeff, at the Naval Research Lab, find an interesting opportunity to work with someone in Jamaica, maybe someone who's on this call or watching this video right now, a proposal could be written and given to my office, and we would evaluate it for funding directly to the Jamaican Research Institution, which I think could open up some opportunities that might not otherwise be there. And typically hiring staff, doing some equipment maintenance, doing consumables purchases, even getting computer time to do some of these simulations are things that our grants can pay for. So I'd like to follow up with that with anyone who's interested as well. I think we do need to keep moving though. So thanks for being here, Jeff. And that was really great to see. Thanks for putting that together on rather short notice. Next up, and I think we're looking at a similar topic here. So we have Dr. Arpita Mandal, who's a geologist looking at water resources and flood risk. So I think that will be related to what we just saw with the hurricanes coming through the whole Caribbean. Dr. Arpita Mandal is a senior lecturer in hydrology and hydrogeology in the Department of Geography and Geology at UWI Mona. She's also an adjunct senior lecturer in engineering hydrology in the Department of Civil Engineering on the same campus in Mona. She's been teaching in Mona since September 2006. She teaches water resources, hydrology and hydrological modeling, engineering hydrology, and geophysics. So the research is focused on hydrological modeling, climate change, and impact of flood risk and water resources. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Dr. Mandal has to say about some of her recent research and how we can work together.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'll just start sharing my screen. You can see my slides, I hope.
Yes, they just popped up.
Yes, yeah. So I've been working on water resources and flood risk studies at UWI Mona, and I'm going to just show a few of the projects we have worked on. There are more projects, but of course, time is a constraint. And if you want details on my publications, it's in the Google Scholar link. So the picture we see here is right from Kingston, targeting one of our main water supply system, the potable water supply system. That's the Mona Reservoir, just near to campus. And the picture you see beside that is the takeoff from the river, Hope River, which feeds the reservoir, and then it comes to a tap. Why I showed it, because Kingston has the maximum water challenges because of its increase in demand and less resources, and climate change has been impacting the water availability in this particular parish. So I just give you a snapshot of the water research that's done at UWI. Prof. Weber mentioned some of it, and some of the stuff I do: water resource estimation, contaminant transport using computer modeling, flood risk under different climate scenarios, chemical analysis of surface and groundwater system. This is with Dr. Gordon Smith from chemistry department there, and also the chemistry department and myself was associated with some stable isotope studies on the Kingston Basin with the National Water Commission. And the last part is not mine, but it's also water research done at UWI at chemistry with Dr. Smith, Gordon Smith. So these are my collaborators, Climate Studies Group. I work with the physics department on climate models. I work with ISD and also work with the Department of Chemistry regarding the water quality stuff. The projects we have successfully completed are sediment budget monitoring and flood risk from IDB funding, state of the Jamaican climate, DVRP studies, disaster risk vulnerability studies, flood monitoring, watersheds in Jamaica and Dominica. I've worked in Dominica as well on the landslide and flood risk. And there's a new project which is starting soon on strengthening water resource management and climate resilience in coastal and inland communities with chemistry, geography, geology, and Department of Physics. And interesting is we are planning to install an early warning system for flooding in one of the most vulnerable watersheds in Jamaica, Port Maria, which often gets impacted by flooding. So that's coming on board. Now, I don't need to give much introduction on Jamaica. This is just an island-wide map of showing the rainfall variation. And Jamaica particularly gets affected with contrasting weather system. We have hurricanes and tropical storms which impact during the Atlantic hurricane season, causing flooding, landslides. On the other hand, we have droughts. And climate change, as we are all aware of, has been impacting our rainfall, temperature, recharge. It's impacting the water quality, saltwater intrusion with increase in sea level rise affecting the coastal aquifers, causing the wells, mainly the coastal wells, to shut down, which is again putting a pressure on the water resource availability inland. Overpumping and abstraction due to increase in urbanization, and this is particularly in Kingston, where we have the maximum population of the island, and increase in overpumping as well as poor water quality has lowered its water resource. Now, climate change impacts are felt everywhere. We see the impact on the water sector with the increase in short duration, high intensity rainfall, such as affected by tropical storms and hurricanes. Now, we worked on using some of the climate models, the RCMs, the regional climate model, which is downscale from the GCMs, and using the different scenarios. The RCP scenarios is in a part of the project. This is state of the Jamaican climate, and we modeled it, applied it over a hydrological model to simulate the stream flow, because the river has been used for irrigation as well as for potable water supply in a parish called the St. Catherine, which is the Rio Cobre watershed, and the Kingston Basin as well. So you use SWOT, surface water analysis tool, to simulate the rainfall runoff for the upper and lower for different RCP scenarios, 2.5, 3.4, 4.6, and 8 scenarios. And we also use the simulated stream flow and the groundwater abstraction data to use another model called WEEP, Water Evaluation and Protection, for generating past and future climate projections for demand and availability. So just this is the watershed model where you put in your parameters like DEM, soil and analysis, and you use the rainfall data as well as the gridded climate data, which is the Reg CM4. I'm showing the grid boxes. This is with collaboration with Climate Studies Group, MONA, where we get the rainfall data for the different grid boxes, and that's gridded rainfall data for the different climate scenarios. And I use that over the watershed, which is the picture which you see at the bottom. I also modeled with the station data, because you have to calibrate the model with station data, and then you can do it for the future climate scenarios. So what we saw was that there is an overall decline in trend in the daily stream flow, which means that there's a drying trend, there's a long-term drying trend. So these yellow, the lines which you see on the right side with the yellow and the red are the stream flow data and the rainfall data as well. So a couple of tributaries we have selected for the Rio Cobre. Why Rio Cobre? This was used as a case study because the Rio Cobre is one of the biggest watersheds, and its water from here is diverted into the Kingston Basin, which is always struggling with water shortage. But overall, we have seen a decrease in the daily stream flow, which means that with end of century projections, we are in a water shortage world. But also we used some of the storms to model the flood, and that part I'm not showing over here. I'll show some other examples of flooding. For the Kingston Basin, as a part of an MPhil project with Dr. Gordon Smith from chemistry, we did a water quality analysis for 2 years for all the available wells. These wells are mapped A1, A2, A3, different wells in Kingston. And we also did the rainwater sampling as well, and which you see over here, this is the elevation, and the brown area is the Ligny alluvial plain where we are all sitting in. So what we have seen, we have published it in a chapter in Global Groundwater, I've attached the publications. We are seeing an increase in nitrate towards the center of the basin in the alluvium aquifer, and we also see chloride in the limestone aquifer, particularly towards the northeast corner of the Kingston Basin. Now, Kingston Basin has been under water shortage not only because of rainfall and low stream flow, but also because of poor water quality. The wells you are seeing now is just 11 wells out of 30 wells which have been shut down because of increase in nitrate and chloride from seawater, saltwater intrusion, as well as from improper sewage treatment from soakaway pits. This was 2-year study. We plan to take this up more and do the modeling part now. That is how the nutrients are moving from the source to the sink, identify possible plume migration with mud flow and other associated models. That's the part of the ongoing project that's going to start. Now, the flood map, we tried to create an island-wide flood hazard map using GIS and statistical software, SPSS, with all the variables that causes flooding along with rainfall, elevation, and we created an island-wide flood hazard map, which could be used for decision-making in disaster management, because now you have an island-wide map which you can classify into low, medium, high zone. So when you overlay your infrastructures, that is road network, and we did that too in the DVRP project. We overlay these infrastructures like pipelines, power lines, the road network, the different potable water facilities, and you can classify how many of these facilities fall in low, medium, high, and then you can use your strategies for mitigation and planning. And a small snapshot of the last bit of flood modeling we've been doing is Port Maria, and this is where we are going to put up the flood warning system. This town is in North Coast in St. Mary Parish, and it's always getting flooded out from a single day rain event. This is not hurricane season, as you see. It's February 1st, 2022. It's just a flash flood caused by a 200 to 300 millimeter of rainfall in one day, and you can see water can go up to 2 to 3 meters. So we did the modeling for this. That was another project in the past with the MPhil student. We modeled and mapped the extent, and that's the modeling. Interestingly, this river, although gets flooded out, there is no stream gauge station over here. So the river is not monitored. There is no flow gauge station, which is why we choose this, so that we can generate this early warning system and disperse these messages to the communities, which are, as you can see, on the eastern side of in this shaded area. Most of the people are on the business communities and commercial entities are on the eastern side, and they all are underwater when it floods, as you can see over here. So we can send out messages through ODPEM and WRA and Met Office that you need to evacuate if the water is moving down at this rate from upstream. How long will it take to move downstream? So that's the objectives, and that will be very useful and innovative as well. And we also use storm tracks. This is with CSGM, Climate Studies Group. This is a Carriway weather portal. It's updated now where you can put your storm track, as you see on the left-hand diagram. I use Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Katrina, and any other hurricane track you want. And you select your speed, and you select your intensity of the hurricane, and you select where you want the hurricane to move. So these 2 points, which you see, are not just an example. You can move it in the other way, and the model will run the hurricane. So the hurricane will move over the eye of that selected watershed, and you can get the predicted or the projected rainfall. So this can also work as an early warning. We used it for the Hope River watershed. We tried it on the Hope watershed, which is just behind campus. That's the same watershed where we are currently located. That's Kingston. And for these 2 particular locations, I modeled for the Ivan track at 25 kilometer and for the 2 locations. Why? Because these 2 locations are upstream of these 2 points where the bridges have collapsed. And these 2 bridges have collapsed from several hurricanes. They are now fine because they have been built up properly and they're in a much better condition. So this is another step, which is an advance. So if you see a hurricane track coming, you can model and predict which way the hurricane will move and how much will be the rainfall and how long will it take water to move from outlet A to outlet B of the river network. In that way, you can issue your alerts. And the last part is also using the climate models for 1.5 versus 2 and 2.5 temperature increase and looking at the same watershed and seeing if there is any change in flood risk for the people living there. We have seen no change. Flooding continues to be a problem, and it can go up to 6 meters of water in these red zones. And interestingly, and again, it's a disadvantage and unavoidable that most of the buildings are located in the riverbed. So that's a challenge as well. So that's a brief summation of some of what I have been doing and what the research in collaboration with different partners. And that's all, and my acknowledgement to different funding agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mandal. That was fantastic. I know in a brief period of time, you gave us a great overview. I'm really excited about the predictive work. You know, you can predict where the flood is going to be. I'm sure that's applicable to various scenarios around the world as well. So I'm sure we'll have some questions about that offline. So anyone who has questions for Dr. Mandal or indeed for Dr. Reed or Professor Weber, please draft your emails now and send them off. Let's move forward. Thanks again, Dr. Mandal. Good to have you here. Let's keep you on the line, of course, and let's move on to another one of my colleagues from the Naval Research Lab. This is Dr. Jim Nguyen, a physicist. Today he'll be speaking, I believe, about biofouling prevention, but he could speak about many topics. Dr. Nguyen leads the materials chemistry branch at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C. He has over 25 years of experience. His research at NRL has centered on the development of novel polymeric coatings and the synthesis of novel active chemicals for a variety of applications, such as de-icing of airplane wings, easy cleaning of various surfaces, signatures, and decontamination. Dr. Nguyen has been issued 17 patents. He's the author of over 83 referee publications and has delivered over 150 professional society presentations. So we're glad to have him here, and let's give him his 10 minutes. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Kyle. And please feel free, if you don't mind, please use the audio to cut me off. I'm using my laptop, so I can't see the chat, if you don't mind.
Oh, great. So yeah, we'll go straight to the hammer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I need that. So thanks for the invitation. I'm Jim Nguyen. I'm from the materials chemistry branch within the chemistry division. My branch is approximately 54 people, PhD chemists, physicists, and we're working together to advance chemistry within the Department of Defense, specifically to advance the themes that the needs and that the Navy will face within the next 10 years. So I'd like to talk to you today about two topics. One of the topics I'd like to talk to you today about is marine surface fouling. Specifically, we want to reduce the unwanted accumulation of material or solid surfaces that hinder function. Barnacles, excellent example. Fouling on a variety of materials, whether it be surfaces that are live or non-living. Specifically today, we'll probably talk more about coatings on ships, specifically hull coatings that are below water. But the topic extends beyond that, specifically industrial, heat exchangers, filtration for desalinization, medical equipment, whether it be fouling. For example, when you go to the dentist, the water lines that provide water as a source to cleaning the teeth, medical dressing, marine fouling, and defense fouling in general. We have a good understanding of marine fouling, specifically marine biofouling. We can have a fresh coating that's put on a boat and is set at sea. And one of the initial phases of this fouling is conditioning. And specifically, the conditioning consists of oxidation of the surface. After the oxidation of the surface, it facilitates the attachment of a variety of bacteria and fouling, specifically biofouling, algae. And this algae nutrient-rich environment creates an environment in which hard fouling growth subsequently attaches. If you look on the right side of the slide that I'm showing here, we have algae that is forming on the ship, on the underside of a ship. Very soft fouling because demonstrated by the elongation of the fouling that occurs. But in the bottom right, we see hard foulers. Hard foulers is indicative of barnacles. Barnacle removal is much harder than removal of hard fouling is much harder than removal of soft fouling.
Jim, Dr. Nguyen.
Okay, so
it seems
where biofouling starts in a nutrient-rich environment, in a port. This environment doesn't exist in open water. And for the Navy, this is a problem. But for a cruise ship, and I'll advance to the next slide. So the impact of biofouling on naval vessels is tremendous. It's a 10% reduction in speed. And many times this results in the US Navy's inability to launch planes from a aircraft carrier. It increases the fuel consumption by 40%, and this accounts to about $1 billion annually. It's a problem. It's a problem. So the current state of the art for the Department of Navy, for the Department of Defense, is foul release coatings. This is the state of the art. This is a coating that has low energy surface. It has the ability to shear off any biofouling that would attach. So, for example, if soft biofouling, hard biofouling would be attached, when the ship is underway, that fouling would depart. And that's shown here at the bottom. We have fouling on the ship coatings, and when the ship is underway, the turbulence at this interface between the water coating interface, the fouling would depart. But this only accounts when the ship is underway. And this is the major difference between the US Navy and commercial shipping, cruise liners. Cruise ships, commercial ships are constantly underway. They spend very little time in port. And because they spend very little time in port, they're constantly underway. The turbulence at the surface is greater, and therefore the renewal of the surface is greater. But for naval ships, we want to save power, energy. We want to save fuel. We want to provide our sailors, our Marines, with a greater experience in port in a variety of countries. And therefore, our ships tend to stay in nutrient-rich ports for a greater period of time, weeks, months on end. These ports have much higher nutrient-rich environments which promote fouling. So our approach has been to combine a passive and active approach to our anti-fouling, where we're trying to embark on a combination of low surface energy, silicon-based coatings, with the attachment of a antimicrobial that is biocidal, broad spectral, and offer this hybrid coating that offers the low energy surface, the active antimicrobial to provide this hybrid surface. Here's a very brief slide where we're doing, I'll point your attention to the upper right. I'm sorry, I'm exceeding my time here. Where you can see in the upper right, the coating was originally all yellow, but the hydrolyzability, the hydrolyzer, and the biocidal antimicrobial surfaces are turning white. So layer by layer, we're able to develop a coating that can slowly degrade over time. 15 years is what we're targeting. You can see the storage modulus here. I'm happy to provide more information on the publications that we have made on this topic. The other topic I'd like to bring to your attention is our ability to electrospin multifunctional composite fibers for improved anti-insect repellent. Specifically, we're looking primarily at insect, malaria, but we know in Southeast Asia, we should be prepared for insect, malaria, other environments. We're looking at 3 major commercially driven insect repellents that are shown here on the bottom left. What we're doing is developing new technology that will incorporate within a coaxial electrospun fiber, shown here on the upper left, where we're able to incorporate the active anti-malarial, anti-insect material within a polymeric fiber. And this can be electrically spun, mechanically spun to generate a fiber that can be incorporated into textile materials. From these materials, we have evaluated and found that they are 90% effective over a 3-year period with periodic washing. This is very dramatic. This is very impactful for us because we feel that whether in Latin America, whether we're in Southeast Asia, this is going to be a topic of importance.
Has his PhD from UE-Mona and remains at the Faculty of Science at UE-Mona, doing physical chemistry, in particular in molecular modeling, using quantum mechanical computational methods to study chemical processes and predict the properties of materials before they're synthesized. Then there's molecular sensing, another focus area that involves the development of chemical compounds and modified electrodes for the sensing of pollutants and biomarkers for early detection of disease in humans. So I think both of those are relevant to your work, Jem. So sensing pollutants, maybe you sense the biofouling in a better way, but then also detecting disease in humans to see if these insecticides are working. So this is a good match. We're really happy to have you with us, Dr. Nelson. Thank you.
Okay, good everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. Very interesting talks. Interestingly, however, I am mainly going to be talking about qubits using monolayers of 2D transition metal dichalcogenides for qubits. But it's quite interesting what the speaker just now was discussing, because indeed I do a lot of work using sensors, electrochemical sensors, and also optical sensors. So that is quite interesting. I wish I could, I could be presenting both my sensor stuff and the qubit systems, but maybe that's another story for another time.
That's great, Dr. Nelson. Qubits sound very interesting too for transition metal. Yeah, you'll have to tell us. Thank you.
Okay, yes. All right, let me just share here. Don't worry, I won't be too long. Where is this thing? Where is it? Let me just let's try again. What is going on here? All right, I think I know what's going on.
It's saying you're starting screen sharing. It says it looks like you're trying to.
Yes. Okay, so let me close one. I have 2 PowerPoints open, so I'll just close one and make things simple. Okay, all right, there we go. Is it? Are you seeing it now?
So, yes. We're seeing the edit mode. The edit mode, of course. So if we're going to be stuck in edit mode, do you want to close your format background there?
Background.
I'm not sure what you see, but we see a good view of the slides. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's see here. We can get this started. All right. So as
that's even better. Perfect.
Okay. Good. As mentioned, I am involved with sensing research for the detection of pollutants, and also the detection of adverse health conditions in humans by, sensing certain chemical compounds in urine or sweat, body fluids. For example, excess sugar, or even the detection of UTI and stuff like that. The detection of lead or copper in wastewater, or just regular water, using electrochemical systems, as well as colorimetric systems that can be incorporated into paper technology. But I am also in tune with the whole idea of quantum computing, and I'm very interested in using quantum mechanics to develop materials that can be applied as qubit systems in quantum computing. I've been doing some fundamental work, and to try to see how I can apply these things a fundamental level, as mentioned. So what I did was to start out with one of my students, looking at a very simple system, a system that is known to some extent, molybdenum sulfide, MOS2, right? And this system is quite simple. It exists in layers, and we can basically separate the layers. So we started out doing some theoretical work because we wanted to use theory to direct the experimental aspect of the work. So we have been basically, working on the theory behind these systems, and we were successful in basically estimating experimental results at about 98% to 99% accuracy, and so that has been quite pleasing. Now, what we have done is to look at basically the band structure of these molybdenum sulfide systems, because as we know, in quantum computing, what you need is you need to create a two-level system that can be manipulated easily, and it can allow what we call quantum entanglement, right, which will allow for the speed of these systems. So as I said, we started out with MOS2, and we use computational methods to predict the structure and also predict the electronic structure of these systems, right? And it was quite successful. However, we wanted to see if we could successfully tailor these systems, tailor their electronic properties. How is it that we could manipulate how they behave electronically? What if we incorporate some sort of what we call crystal defects into these systems? For example, what if you remove one atom? What if you just add a random transition metal to the lattice of these systems? What will happen to their electronic structure? Would they become more conductive, less conductive? Would they become more optically active, less optically active? And we did this because we wanted to see how we could control the electronic structure of these systems and to tailor their electronic structure such that we end up with a two-level type of arrangement in terms of their electronics that we could now use to act as quantum bits. Okay, and that will also allow quantum entanglement, which is very important in this area. Right. So in incorporating these defects, we have to, we went ahead and to calculate stuff like defect formation energy, and this basically, it allowed us to predict whether or not these defects that we were, postulating, if they could actually form in these systems, or is it that we're just thinking crazy? Could these things actually exist? And of course, we went ahead and calculate defect formation energies and compare those to experimental data, and we were able to prove that yes, these things can be formed. These types of defects can be formed, and we looked at a number of different types of defects. Defects such as doping defects, which is basically us taking a metal which is not necessarily native to the original structure and adding it to the structure. Basically adding what you could say impurities and see what happens to the electronics. We also did what we call native defects, which basically involves us taking atom from the system, which is already a part of the system, and putting it somewhere where it should not be. Right? Replacing an atom in the system with another atom that is also a part of the system. We also looked at the idea of vacancy defects, basically just removing an atom from the system that should be there and leaving a void. You know, and then, you know, to check how that affects the electronic structure of these systems. So we did a lot of that, and we looked at how these properties change. We looked at the changes in the spin states, upspin versus downspin, right? Because these are what we will use to act as bits, quantum bits, right? And these are what we will manipulate in coding information into these systems. So we look at upspin versus downspin. What happens to the amount of upspin versus downspin when you create these defects, when you damage these crystals, if you want to put it like that. And in some cases, we realize that we could even cause these systems to behave like metals. So this material could become metallic and become a really good conductor as a result of overlap between the conduction and valence bands in the structure of these systems. We realize that by creating these defects, we could cause the material to become magnetic, and we could also control how magnetic it is, the magnetic moment then. We could turn that up a little bit, we could turn it down a little bit. So we, you know, played around some more because we wanted to understand, you know, what we can do with these systems. As I said, you know, we created a number of defects, interstitial defects, vacancy defects. We also incorporated external atoms, what we call foreign atoms, into these systems, and to look at how the spin states respond to this type of thing. And this is important because it as I mentioned, the spin states are what we will use to code the information. All right. So what's going on? Is it stuck? Oh, no. Okay, right. So the end goal in all of this is to move to the practical aspect of the work. And we have done a lot of theoretical work on it, and we continue to do more theoretical work, but now we want to get to the practical aspect of this. In creating, as I mentioned earlier, a two-level system, which is optically active, right? So you can have optical transitions between the conduction and valence band. I want it to be like this because you don't want your system to ionize when you're manipulating the electrons. You don't want electrons to be jumping out of your material when you're manipulating the material using photons. So you need optical transitions within the band gap. And the only way you can get that is if you're able to manipulate accurately the electronic structure of the material. All right, so to create a two-level system like this one here. And also ensure that you have a triplet ground state. You have electrons which are what we would say spinning in the same direction. Okay, parallel spins. Some similar work was done by Lee and co-workers, proving that this material could actually be used if it is doped with something like tungsten. Okay, if we do a substitutional defect using something like an element like tungsten, then you could actually create a tool system which could act as a quantum bit, and the energy of the transition of the quantum bit actually falls in the appropriate range for optical manipulation in devices. So that kind of indicates to us that, okay, we're on to something here. Now, just to point out that the idea of using these materials to create quantum bits is not a pipe dream. We could actually create these defects. So it's not some far-fetched idea where the creation of these defects is concerned. You could actually use the tip of an atomic force microscope or a scanning tunneling microscope, still a atomic force microscope basically, to create these defects and also to position them on the crystal wherever you want them to be. This is something that I have actually done already in terms of AFM lithography, atomic force microscopy lithography, basically creating structures on a crystal, wherever I desired. So we know that this can happen. So we want to now move to the practical aspect of this. And one interesting thing before I end, these materials with the defects can be used as sensors. All right. In fact, some people would say that, look, the idea of using them as sensors is a more realistic idea than using them, as quantum bits, and they would be very sensitive. So we could actually use them as quantum sensors, and that would take a little bit less effort. But so far, this is where we're at, where the development of monolayers for application in quantum information science is concerned.
That's great, Dr. Nelson. Thank you. Thank you. It was fun to see a curveball there, from sensors to qubits. The same sort of experience.
Yeah. I have some sensor stuff for you and some pesticide stuff. So if anybody wants to hear about that, I'm ready.
Very good. I think some of the audience is actually. So please send Dr. Nelson your questions per email if you need help.
Yes, please. We could work on some sensors together.
Yes, sensors, of course, are a big, important aspect of our work in the Navy. Sensing various. Exactly. I mean, Dr. Nguyen is an expert. It's a good match.
Yeah, we need to talk to him. I need to reach out to him.
I think so. Very good. Okay, let's step forward to another talk focusing on quantum information science. I think a bit different focus, but I think it's again a good match for the talk here.
Great. All right, let me ensure.
Next up. Yep. Next up, we have Dr. Adam Black, who is he's the leader of the quantum optics section at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. His research focuses on improved architectures for cold atom quantum sensing and quantum networking. So quantum sensing is back. He received his PhD in physics from Stanford. He was a visiting scholar at the Harvard MIT Center for Ultra Cold Atoms, and then completed the National Research Council postdoctoral fellowship at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, also known as NIST. He's been developing quantum sensors for 9 years in industry, but then came over to the Naval Research Lab about 9 years ago in 2016. So let's welcome Dr. Black.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for being here.
Getting shared here. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, it looks great.
Great, and let me apologize for not being on camera. We had some technical difficulties, so it's better just to stay off. I am in the quantum optics section, which is part of the optical sciences division at the Naval Research Laboratory, and I'll be talking about some of our quantum-oriented work, so it's a nice dovetail with Dr. Nelson's talk. But I should mention that various types of quantum research, including 2D materials, quantum research is done in various other parts of NRL. So if there's any interest in engagement in other areas other than those I'm going to talk about, please get in touch. So I'm going to talk about a different kind of quantum system, laser-cooled atomic gases, and how we can use those as sensors. And I think particularly we're looking at sensors of motion in this case. But first, I want to back up a little bit and talk about why we bother using quantum systems, particularly for sensing. There are obviously, have been many different types of sensors relying on classical principles for decades to hundreds of years, depending on how you count. So why are quantum systems better? And what do we even mean by a quantum system? What I mean here is basically a system that exposes the particular differences between systems governed by the laws of quantum mechanics versus those that can be adequately described using classical physics. So phenomena like quantum entanglement, superposition, quantum interference, things like that. These systems can make nice sensors partly because they're so simple. It sounds a little paradoxical because we often think of quantum mechanics as a bit mysterious, kind of wave our hands and say, look at the funny quantum thing over there. But actually, they're quite simple. We can often build models from the ground up of a quantum system, just starting with Schrödinger's equation over here, and describe a hydrogen atom and other atoms as well. And this can lead to sensors that can be accurate without the need for calibration, or without the need for very much calibration. We can also, using quantum systems, engineer interactions with the environment. So we can attempt to completely eliminate interaction with the environment, and that can make a nice clock, for example. Or we can maximize the dependence on magnetic field, and that can make a nice magnetometer. Through this engineering, you can also store and manipulate quantum information. And then finally, these features, you think of like the quantum weirdness kind of aspects of entanglement and superposition, can enable new applications, including quantum enhanced communication security, sensors that are enhanced by quantum entanglement, networks of sensors and clocks, and of course, quantum computers are a prime example of that. So at NRL, there's a lot of work in different quantum systems. I'm going to focus on the top area here in sensing, position, navigation. And we work on a variety of different systems in that area, but there's also work in networking and computing as well here. And we use a bunch of different types of quantum hardware platforms for these studies at NRL. In my group, we're primarily focused on the left side of this chart in atomic gases. However, there's also work on the right-hand side, which are solid-state systems. What you can think of as artificial atoms, atoms that are essentially fabricated in, say, semiconductor systems, things like spin defects, and color centers that behave a lot like atoms, but in the solid state. But what I'm going to talk about here are sensors we can build with atoms that are laser cooled and trapped. So the idea there is that if we have an atomic gas, just a gas of, say, rubidium atoms inside of a little vacuum cell, we can shine appropriately tuned laser light onto that gas, cool it down to millionths of a degree above absolute zero, and this is done just using lasers and sometimes magnetic fields without any need for, say, cryogens or liquid nitrogen, liquid helium in these systems. And you get a little glowing ball of atoms that are extremely well isolated from their environment. Every rubidium atom in the system is the same as every other rubidium atom, assuming we've chosen a particular isotope, and we can achieve long quantum coherence times. So a great degree of exposure of those quantum properties that I mentioned that make these things interesting quantum systems. And so you can see in this red circle sort of a variety of different systems we've built based on these principles, including atoms trapped on a chip in a magnetic trap, a cold atomic beam, and magneto-optic traps, which is sort of a bread and butter of this field. And I want to focus here on our work in inertial sensors, and so that's basically things that measure either motion or gravity. And there's been a long story in using cold atomic gases for these types of measurements. There's even a commercial gravimeter you can go out and buy if you want. But these are largely, this is changing a little bit now, but these have over time in the past been largely static systems that you kind of put on the ground and make a really amazingly good measurement, say, of gravity, but the thing can't go on a ship, for example, which is what we're interested in. So our research focuses on taking these same principles that have been the basis of cold atom sensor research over the past couple of decades and transition these sensor architectures to things that measure fast, can measure at rates appropriate for measurement on naval platforms. And particularly, we've done work on shipboard gravity measurement and also a cold atom accelerometer and gyroscope. So that's something you would use for inertial navigation. When GPS isn't around, you can use accelerometers and gyroscopes to determine where you are. It turns out that when you make these changes to go from a very sort of slowly measuring static system to something that measures at a high rate, you need to really manage the signal to noise of the system really well. You're kind of trading off some intrinsic sensitivity that you get from measuring very, very slowly, and instead having to measure with very high signal to noise ratio to operate with very good sensitivity at a high measurement rate. So that's what we focus on in our development of these platforms. And so one example is strap-down maritime quantum gravimetry. So this is a type of sensor that, unfortunately, I don't really have the sensor architecture shown here, but this is a type of sensor that makes use of a laser-cooled ball of atoms, say 10 million in rubidium atoms, occupying, say, about a millimeter of space, that we can interrogate using a technique called matter wave interferometry to make a very accurate measurement of gravity. And we want to operate these gravimeters in what's called a strap-down configuration, where instead of having to have them very carefully stabilized, so the sensor is always oriented vertically, using a gimbal, we want to get rid of the gimbal, operate these things basically bolted down to the deck of a ship. This gets rid of a lot of cost, size, and complexity, and allows operation on smaller vessels. But this is a challenge because of the motional coupling to the signals we get from these atoms. So one thing we did was develop a simulation, sort of the architecture of the simulation shown here, of the atomic physics in a sensor that's actually moving on a characteristic naval platform. So this thing's it's on a ship that's bobbing up and down and so on. And we demonstrated what's shown on the lower right is that if we perform appropriate error compensation in systems like this, that we can indeed make very accurate measurements of gravity under characteristic ship motion. So why would you want to do that? Well, it's kind of shown on the upper right. One example of this is, for an application for this is navigation. If you don't have GPS for any of a variety of reasons, but you do have a high quality gravimeter and a high quality map of gravity, kind of worldwide, then you can use a combination of an inertial measurement unit, there's accelerometers and gyroscopes in it, and a gravimeter to compare the local measurement of gravity with what's on the map, and you can actually find out where you are in that way and navigate over long periods of time. So we found out in our simulations that this was feasible, but then in partnership with the Office of Naval Research and some of their commercial partners who actually, industry partners who actually built a gravimeter shown here, they took this out to sea in this program and showed that strap-down gravity mapping could take place at a high degree of accuracy for long periods of time. So they kind of showed that what we'd done in the simulations was in fact accurate. And I'll move on to some of our in-house experimental work, in which we're developing a three-dimensionally cooled atomic beam interferometer. So this, again, operates by a similar principle to that gravimeter I showed. It's a matter wave interferometer, and we want to use this to measure rotations and accelerations. So we built this in the lab. It achieves record signal-to-noise ratio. It measures continuously at high measurement rate, which is our goal, as I mentioned. It projects to high-performance gyroscope and accelerometer measurements simultaneously, and it's demonstrated a number of new capabilities in sensing. And these are just some example plots from the sensor that we built. And I'll just mention that these are complicated sensors. They have lasers, they have mirrors, a lot of things. And so the path towards making these things smaller is through collaboration with folks who work on photonic integrated circuits. The goal is to take something like an optical lab table and put it on a chip. Certainly the field is not there yet, but every month more and more components are developed that can be put into these integrated photonic platforms and make these things smaller, fabricatable, cheaper. So it really provides a path to fielding these sensors. And I believe my time's about up, so thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Great to see all that amazing work, especially the quantum gravity measurements, the measurements of gravity using quantum sensors, gravimeter. Very interesting. Cool. Yes, good combinations here. One more talk for the day, and if there's any questions for Adam, for Dr. Black, please send him an email. I'm sure we can find him somewhere. And one more talk for the day. It's Dr. Sean Miller, a computer scientist at UWI-Mona. Thanks again, Dr. Black. Dr. Sean Miller's research focuses on applying machine learning and artificial intelligence in cybersecurity and healthcare. He developed multi-perspective machine learning, a method that enhances prediction accuracy by combining multiple learning techniques. And in healthcare, his work is particularly aimed at improving heart disease predictions by making machine learning models more interpretable and actionable for healthcare professionals. Dr. Miller's collaborative research continues to bridge the gap between advanced AI and real world, benefiting both cybersecurity and healthcare. And I would say that all healthcare data needs to be extremely secure from a cybersecurity standpoint. So that's a good one. And I also like this idea of multi-perspective machine learning. In my experience, an ensemble technique always does a better job than a single machine learning model. So I'm very excited to hear about that. And I see botnet detection very applicable to all of us who use the internet. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller, for being here.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So today we'll be actually focused on the application of multi-perspective machine learning for botnet detection. So we have applied it in healthcare, specifically heart disease detection. But today we'll be focused on how it works for botnet detection and some of the features and benefits that it produces. So the outline for the presentation, we just first talk about what botnets are. I think everybody should know what botnets are and what a bot is, because it affects us all whether we know it or not. When we talk about the approach, multi-perspective machine learning, and then some of the results that we had compared to other ensemble learning methods. So firstly, what is a botnet? Well, a botnet is simply a network of infected computers. So we have these guys that we call a bot master, and they are the ones that are controlling these bots. They control the botnet itself. And what they do, they communicate with individual machines via what we call a command and control server, command and control channel. And they use the combined resources of these zombie machines that they have taken over to actually carry out malicious activity. And sometimes I like to tell persons that more than likely you're a part of a botnet and you don't know it, because the aim of a bot
Okay, Dr. Miller's connection has been interrupted. Let's wait a minute or two for him to return.
Hello?
Dr. Miller, you're back. Yeah. You were just telling us that it's likely we've been part of a botnet, and we might even be part of a botnet right now. And then we got worried that perhaps the bots had taken you.
So yes, so I'm saying it's more than likely that some persons, you probably, us, we're a part of a botnet, because the aim of a bot master and the aim of this particular malware is not to necessarily damage the computers that they overtake, but it's really to use the combined resources of those machines. And what a bot master would typically do is operate in such a way that the computer that they have taken over, or the owner of those computers, are not aware that they are a part of a botnet, and they will use a small portion of the resource of the resources of that computer so that they can obfuscate their presence. They obfuscate their presence on the network as well. So the aim of the botmaster really is to have as many computers, have many devices, because they even have mobile devices that can be taken over and put on these networks of bots. But why should we care? I mean, the botmaster is not trying to destroy your device, really. It's trying to destroy somebody else's device or somebody else's server or take down somebody else's network. But why should we care? Well, it affects us all. In a study done all the way back in 2006, it reported that 27% of all malicious connection attempts can be directly linked to bot-related activities. That's 20% of all the activities on the internet. And bots have become the main vehicle to perform many cyber crimes. So you'll find even on the dark web and in cyber criminal spheres, they are renting out these botnets so that other criminals can use this botnet for their own purposes, whether it be to send phishing email spam or identity theft and the crowd favorite distributed denial of service attacks. And today, botnets continue to generate as much as 30% of all internet traffic, and bots are currently one of the most dangerous threats to the internet today. And also, botnets are a very common tool among cyber criminals, as we just mentioned. And how are we fighting back? What have we been doing as it relates to this fight against botnets and cyber criminals in this particular way? Well, we found most of the research in the literature denotes that machine learning based botnet detection systems are among the most effective against botnets. So we have different techniques, but applied machine learning techniques are the most promising methods for botnet detection. Now, why is that? Because machine learning has the ability to find patterns in the data. Because remember, botmasters who develop these botnets, their aim is to remain obfuscated under the radar and to really slip in without being noticed. And the traffic that we analyze, human eyes will not be able to immediately or readily pick out what type of traffic or what type of activity may be related to a botnet or not. But machine learning has the ability to really recognize these patterns, and we are able to develop models based on the network traffic that will be able to distinguish between bot activity and normal activity. And different authors approach the same problem from multiple angles. Well, when we look at the general characteristics of botnets, because if we're going to try and detect something, we need to understand the characteristics and to recognize, okay, what should we use as some sort of metric or some sort of guide in detecting the activities of these types of
Dr. Miller, we have your other feed. There you go.
Yes. So, I mean, it was going perfectly. The internet was doing perfectly well.
You're back.
Presentations. You're hearing me now?
Yes, I do.
Cool. So the general characteristics of botnets, realize that they are multifaceted, they are subtle and dynamic. What do we mean by multifaceted? They can attack from multiple angles. They can use different protocols. They can employ different means of getting into a particular network system or setup. And they're subtle, as we mentioned before. They use protocols. They use communication methods that will reflect normal traffic so that it doesn't seem suspicious when we take a look at the log files or the traffic that's passing on the network. And they are dynamic. This is one of the most, I would say, distinguishing characteristic of bot malware is the fact that most malware, an attacker would create it and deploy it and send it out. But botnets, they have the ability, or bot masters have the ability to communicate with the malware, or rather the bots that they have enslaved, and they are able to even update the malware just in case there was that someone developed or some company developed a way to detect. They can update their botnets in such a way that they can avoid detection. And that's the problem that we're really working with. So multifaceted detection systems operate on the host or the network, because botnets affect individual machines, but they also communicate over the network. And observing both of those would be effective in detecting where botnets are and what they are doing. And subtle, as we have mentioned so many times, bot masters want their traffic and activity to blend in. They want it to go unnoticed. And also, dynamic bot masters can update bots on their network. Nice. So, what is multi-perspective machine learning? So, multi-perspective machine learning is based on two machine learning concepts: ensemble learning and multi-view learning. Right? So ensemble learning meaning that we have multiple models coming together in a committee of sorts to make a final decision. And multi-view learning, you take different aspects of a problem and put it together, and by organizing it in that manner, you should get more accurate and effective predictions. So traditional machine learning approach, we have a single model, and that single model is trained on the data set, and then that data set creates a model and we get predictions from a single model. But with ensemble learning, we have multiple models, probably trained on the same data set or different subsets of the data set, and those models all make predictions, and then they are combined in a way. There are many different methods of combination for deciding among the committee members of an ensemble machine learning approach. But the combined effort of multiple models have proven to be more effective at detections over time. Now, multi-perspective machine learning. So we have the algorithm, the data set, and instances and features. And what's the main characteristic of multi-perspective machine learning? It's the perspectives. So what we do, we analyze the particular problem. In this case, it's botnet detection. In another case, it might be heart disease detection. And we analyze the problem and we look at what features of the problem may be related to each other. And based on those feature relations, based on how related those features are, we put them in what we call perspectives. And each perspective is trained. So the data set from each perspective is trained by a particular machine learning algorithm, and that creates a model. So we'd have multiple models created from different subsets of the data based on the relationship between the features, and then they will be able to make predictions and then combine some combination method to get to a final prediction. And what we'll find is that grouping features seem to be more effective than simply putting everything in one. Now, what this shows when we group the feature is that there are benefits to this grouping. When we apply grouped features, whether it be supervised or unsupervised, we see an improvement in the detection or the accuracy of these models. Now, in this example, we have individual activity and group activity, where on the network, bots might behave in a particular way. And if we understand how they behave, we are able to design techniques or design models that will be able to detect whether they are acting individually or acting as a group. Now, the results that we saw or we get when we apply this multi-perspective machine learning to botnet detection, we compared the results of multi-perspective machine learning with different ensemble methods: bagging, boosting, and random subspace methods. So these are other ensemble methods that already exist and are there. And the metrics that were used use accuracy, precision, how sensitive the model is to actual botnets, and the specificity. Cool. And we find that multi-perspective machine learning, when applied, is the sensitivity, right, is very high. It's very sensitive to botnets. The specificity is a bit lower, and the precision, but the accuracy is also a bit lower. But this was with a particular ensemble method where we had ADB. So this was boosting method. And for this particular example, we use 500 members in the committee. So this was 500 models combining their results to actually make a prediction. Whereas with multi-perspective machine learning, we had only 7. And we saw that as very interesting. We had to get up to 500. In the comparison, when we used 2 models right here, we also saw that it was comparable to boosting, which still had 500. So this is multi-perspective using naive Bayes with 2 models with 7 and boosting with 500. Cool. And when we look at the results as it relates to other types of combination methods or ensemble methods, realize that multi-perspective machine learning gives a really good accuracy as it relates to botnet detection with less Bayes classifiers, as models as we would call them. Cool. And that is it for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Results look good, promising, maybe more efficient than the boosting.
Definitely.
Well, thanks. That was a great spectrum of research from both the Naval Research Lab and the Faculty of Science and Technology at UWI-Mona. I hope there's some good follow-up discussions, but it's just a nice tasting menu, let's say, from a variety of excellent researchers. So thanks to everyone who was able to tune in. If you were able to watch a recording of this, perhaps at some point, glad to have you here. Glad to learn more about the research going on from the researchers themselves. And thanks to all the researchers for preparing these nice talks, staying on time, and working together. Appreciate it. And of course, thanks so much to Dr. Curtis for giving us the time and organizing things. Thanks to Ishmael for running the show. Let's hope the botnets stay away from us and our computers, and that we have a good rest of our days. Thank you so much, and take care.